Mystical Space Typhoon is one of Yu-Gi-Oh's oldest and most iconic quick play spell cards. It was introduced in Magic Ruler way back in 2002, now known as Spell Ruler, and that was the very first set with quick play spells as a mechanic. So Mystical Space Typhoon has been around for a very long time, and I would argue that pretty much every single old school and new school Yu-Gi-Oh player is at least aware of MST's existence. Maybe you played it in a deck when it released way back in the day in Magic Ruler. You know, that was a really exciting moment. MST was pretty hyped up back then, and obviously it was very good. Maybe you've played it in a more modern deck to either destroy your opponent's back row basically for free, or to pop your own back row to trigger their graveyard effects. Or perhaps, even if you haven't played with it or against it, you've at least seen some memes with MST. You know, the old MST doesn't negate meme has been around pretty much as long as this card has been in the game. Everyone knows that MST was a great spot removal card back in the day, but it also saw play throughout the years as well, even in modern times. These days though, at least in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG, Mystical Space Typhoon is not very popular, and in today's video I wanted to talk about why. It is important though to understand the context for MST and what this card's category is. This is not a card in the same category as Heavy Storm or Harpy's Feather Duster or Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched. This is not a card that is designed to take out a ton of back row cards that your opponent controls. What Mystical Space Typhoon lacks in power, it makes up for in versatility. I think it was a really good introduction to quick play spell cards because that is one of the reasons why this card was so good for so many years. I'm pretty sure most people watching this video are aware of what MST does, but basically this is a quick play spell card that simply says target one spell or trap on the field, destroy that target. It's not flashy, it's not overpowered, but it was a card that was good for a long time, partly because there wasn't a lot of competition in MST's category. Later on in 2002, after MST was released, we would get Dust Tornado, which was a pretty good card. You know, nowadays people don't really think about Dust Tornado, but back in the day it actually was fairly popular as your 4th, 5th, and 6th copy of MST, and it also was pretty good for the 5 years when MST was limited. Beyond that, you also had cards like Twister. Twister was a quick play spell card that required you to pay 500 life points, and it only destroyed face-up spell and trap cards. That was, though, a great side deck option for a lot of years alongside MST, once again here, especially during the times when MST was limited or perhaps even semi-limited. While there were other cards that sort of filled the MST role, I think the biggest two for a long time were Dust Tornado and Twister, which a lot of modern players might not realize because those cards have long fallen out of popularity. And then in 2011, when MST finally got unlimited after being limited and semi-limited for a lot of years, people were still playing it. You know, people were happy to have 3 copies of MST in their decks. And that's when I started to notice that Konami really wanted to print more versions of this card, even though a lot of them weren't as successful as MST. We had Night Beam in 2012. That card wasn't a quick play spell card, but it did have the benefit that your opponent could not respond with the card that you targeted. We also had Galaxy Cyclone, once again here not a quick play spell card, but it did give you an extra destruction effect on the following turn, which was pretty appealing. But I really think it was 2016 that marked the downward spiral of Mystical Space Typhoon's popularity. Don't get me wrong, the card still saw play not only in 2016, but also all the way through like 2018, 2019, which we'll talk about later on in this video, but this was a year when Konami released not one, but 2 different MST replacements. So, for example, in the first core set of 2016, Breakers of Shadow, we got Twin Twisters. Twin Twisters is a very good quick play spell card that obviously still sees play in 2022. This card says, just in case you don't know, discard 1 card, then target up to 2 spell or traps on the field, destroy them. Twin Twisters was hugely popular, and this was one of Konami's biggest pushes to power creep MST. Now obviously it's not better than MST in every situation. You know, you don't always have a discard in hand, and obviously not every deck wants to discard cards, but one thing that made Twin Twisters so appealing to a lot of players, and I do apologize here because this is a bit of a conceptual thing, so try and stay with me, but In the hands where you want back row removal, drawing a Twin Twisters is kind of like drawing two copies of MST. You have the Twin Twisters in hand, and you have whatever the worst card in your hand is. Those are essentially your two copies of MST. Now, it's not exactly the same, but it's basically the same. But where it really changes is that when you don't want back row removal in your hand, instead of having two copies of MST, you only have the one back row removal card, the Twin Twisters. So Twin Twisters can be a lot better because in the matchups where you want back row removal, it turns your worst card into an MST essentially, but in the matchups where you don't care about back row removal, you don't have as many dead draws in your deck. So Twin Twisters was a very good card because in diverse formats, which the latter half of 2016 was pretty diverse, it's good to have a card that is not only great against back row decks like MST already would have been, but it's not nearly as bad against the combo decks because instead of having two dead cards in hand, like if you had two MST, which is what the card is basically doing against the back row decks, you only have one copy of Twin Twisters. Sorry if that's kind of like overcomplicating it. As I'm saying it out loud, it does sound kind of confusing, but basically, yeah, Twin Twisters is good in different matchups, and that really did give a lot of players a reason to play it in their decks. But even with Twin Twisters release, we still saw a lot of people playing MST. Not every deck wanted to discard, not every deck could afford the discard, honestly, so a lot of people still played MST instead of Twin Twisters. But then about half a year later, still in 2016 though, we got Cosmic Cyclone out of the Dark Illusion. Cosmic Cyclone is a quick play spell card that says, pay 1000 life points, then target one spell or trap on the field, destroy it. With the release of Twin Twisters and Cosmic Cyclone in 2016, it became increasingly difficult to justify playing MST. That's not to say that the card never saw play, it certainly did, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments here, but with Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters, you basically covered all bases that you would want to with these types of cards. If you wanted to discard a card and pop more back row, you could play Twin Twisters, or if you didn't want to discard a card, you could play Cosmic Cyclone, which for the cost of 1000 life points let you banish the back row card instead of just destroying it like in the case of MST. And obviously nowadays most modern players are well aware of how good Cosmic Cyclone is. There are tons of spell and trap cards that have graveyard effects. But even back in 2016, there were spell and trap cards that you did not want to put in the graveyard. For example, a card like Phantom Knight's Fogblade was very popular back in 2016. That was when Phantom Knights first released, and Cosmic Cyclone was a great way to banish that card, which not only avoided the effect negation ability of it, but also kept it out of the graveyard so your opponent couldn't banish it to revive a Phantom Knight. But even with the release of those two very powerful quick play spell cards in 2016, people still continued to play MST in a variety of competitive decks. Basically, and this is still true even to this day, if you are playing a deck that could theoretically benefit off of destroying your own spell and trap cards, MST is probably a better option than Cosmic Cyclone. For example, in 2016, actually released in the same set as Cosmic Cyclone, we got the Metal Foes archetype, and that deck had a card like Metal Foes combination that you would actually want to destroy with your own card effects, because then it would trigger its graveyard effect to add a Metal Foes monster from your deck to your hand. And that meant a lot of Metal Foes players decided to play MST over Twin Twisters or Cosmic Cyclone because they couldn't afford to discard with Twin Twisters. It was a pendulum deck after all, and they didn't want to banish cards because potentially on turn 1 you could use your own MST to pop your combination to start comboing off. So MST actually was a very popular card in the Metal Foes deck in 2016. MST continued to see play throughout 2017 as well, sometimes even alongside cards like Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters, which is kind of interesting because it sort of took the role of Dust Tornado way back in the day, where MST might not have been as good as Cosmic Cyclone, but it was okay as like a 4th, 5th, and 6th copy of it. But then in 2018, MST really came back to the forefront of competition in the Sky Striker deck. So the Sky Striker deck played a lot of spell cards, and many of their cards got bonus abilities if you had 3 or more spell cards in your graveyard, so it was really cool to be able to use a card like MST to pop your own spell cards to potentially put 3 spells in grave for really powerful effects like Sky Striker Engage. But it also was pretty good because you had multiple cards that you actually would want to put in the graveyard for their own graveyard effects. You played cards like the Field Spell, which could special summon a Sky Striker Ace Ray from your deck when it was sent to the graveyard, so MST could not only fill up your graveyard with spell cards, but also special summon a Ray right from your deck, which could come in pretty clutch, especially in the early stages of the game. You also had a card like Metal Foes Fusion, which was played in Sky Strikers alongside Foolish Burial Goods, just as like a pseudo upstart goblin that put 2 spells in grave instead of just one spell engraved, and when you drew Metal Foes Fusion, which obviously wasn't really good, you could potentially use MST to destroy it, which not only would put 2 spells engraved, but also would give you the potential to draw a card with the Metal Foes Fusion, just in case your hand wasn't very good. However, as Sky Strikers became less popular over the years because they kept getting hit on the ban list, MST also became less popular as well. And these days it feels like MST is less popular than ever. I really do not know the last time someone used this card against me in real life, but certainly it does still see play from time to time. You know, in a game like Master Duel, it's a good budget option because it's only a rare or a common, I think. And I think in Duel Links, they recently got MST and it's pretty good in that format as well. But as far as the TCG goes, MST is pretty much non-existent. That is a real shame because the card obviously has a long legacy, but let's be real here, for a card released in 2002, it's pretty damn impressive that it was able to see play for so many years. Anyway, that is pretty much all for today's video. Let me know in the comment section below, when was the last time that you played MST in your Yu-Gi-Oh deck? Are you playing it in Master Duel right now? Are you playing it in the TCG in real life? Let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll see you later though. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.